All right, excited to be back. I think we have many friends of the show, but maybe the original friend of the show, Coach Zach Scotto, is going to come on and talk to us about some pin and pull buck sweep stuff. It's actually the start of something I want to try and do throughout the rest of the summer and the fall, and that's get some OSFL coaches on to talk about some stuff that they ran last summer. Obviously, Zach and I both coach in that league, so I thought I'd be more authentic to start with ourselves before we start asking other people to share some of their best stuff. But, kind of keep it short, one player, one concept, that high school coaches might be able to use, going into this fall. And then I would want to flip it back the other way in the winter where we get some high school coaches on to talk about some stuff the summer guys can steal, for summer ball. But thanks again, Zach, for coming on. I know if people watch these videos, you've seen Zach present on everything from OLINE technique. What was the original one? Pass set, I think, and then we did.
I was diagnosing a pass set, breaking it up into different phases.
Yeah, so tons of good O-line stuff. Coach Scotto was our offensive coordinator with the Cambridge Lions this summer. Did a great job with a really, really functional group on offense. Our season, unfortunately, ended last week to a really good team in London and playoff game. Took them to the wire, 25-22, great game. And our offense is really effective all year. So excited to talk a little bit more about, pin and pull buck sweep stuff, Zach, and I'll let you take it over, and then I'll jump in with any questions I got as we go.
Awesome. So thanks again for having me as always. I'm super happy to be part of it. It's been a little while now. Losing in a tight game usually hurts a little bit more, but as you said, we lost to a really good football team in London, and wish them nothing but the best. Depending on when this time gets posted, maybe they've already played their semifinal game, but obviously wish them the best of luck. Talking about a little bit of buck sweep, pin and pull type stuff. Got exposed to it. I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm not sure at this point, but I'm a big fan of it, especially if you have an athlete at tailback, and if you're a high school coach looking at this, typically you put your best athlete, depending on the skill of your quarterback, you put your best athlete at your boundary one or at your running back. So if you have a really good athlete at running back, or if you have athletes that aren't traditional up front downhill players, buck sweep can be a pretty big friend for you. Now looking at it, similar to inside zone, similar to power, there are so many different ways you can run it. And a lot of it depends on the types of sets that you want to run. If you're a base ace team, if you have a fullback body, the way you can run it really depends a lot on what you have. But the beauty of a play like this is it's about getting athletes in space, so you can run it pretty much out of any type of personnel that you have, which is the beautiful part about it. You got to have some willing blockers, but in the high school game, if you spend some time on that, you can really teach that ability. You really only need one guy specifically to be able to block on the front side edge, and the rest can be manufactured as long as they're willing. So looking at pin and pull from a base concept, it is, if you're thinking literally, it is literally pinners and pullers, right? So if you have an angle, you're more often than not a pin player. If you don't have an angle, you're often a pull player. That really only holds true typically from the front side working to the center or the backside guard, depending on how you're running it. There's a couple different ways you can run it. Some of it is dependent on who your athlete is as a center, who your backside guard is as an athlete, whether you trust your center snapping. There are different decisions there going on how you're going to deal with the backside, but the front side is usually pretty typical. So any pin and pull, you're essentially going to have some type of quote unquote crack block. Now the crack block of the crack block of old that we know doesn't exist anymore. It's a dangerous play. But there's nothing saying that you can't go to the edge and be physical, whether that's with a tight end, a fullback, a slot receiver, or a receiver motioning down on the line of scrimmage. There's nothing that says you can't come down and be physical. There are rules now protecting players that are in vulnerable positions, and you can't go in there and just take that guy's head off anymore. But the purpose of the play isn't to do that, right? Really what you're trying to do is you're trying to take that C gap player and at a minimum keep him in that C gap, if not pin him down into the B gap. So that's where you can see our tight end here in the boundary. The wide receiver is pinning down on that cue, that boundary end. And then the play side guard and the play side tackle have a decision to make between them on which one is going to pull based on leverage. So in this instance, the tackle has leverage on a down block. So he's going to say you, we just use a you me call based on who has leverage as the puller. So if I say you, that means you're pulling. If I say me, that means I'm pulling, right? Really quick, simple, just based on leverage, and whatever call you're in, you live with it. So if they stem, if they shift, right, unless you got to sight adjust if you have the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, you live with it. And you just got to change your angle as the pin guy. So in this case, the tackle's blocking down and the guard's pulling around. I'll get to pull stuff in a second. And then here is where, as a scheme guy, as a coordinator, is where you can start making decisions based on what you want to get out of the play and who your athletes are. So for me in the summer, I had a pretty athletic center, and I had a center that was I was very confident in snapping. He would very, very rarely, if ever, miss snaps. I would say probably about 95% throughout the entire summer, if not higher. So him not missing snaps and being a pretty good athlete, my decision was made that it's more to our advantage, nothing against our guards. It's just more to our advantage to pull the center because he's just closer to the point of attack, which means he can win with leverage better, right? He has that increased leverage relative to my backside guard. So as he's going to get to the point of attack faster, he's going to be able to see things better because he's got less things crossing his vision. So that's why we do that. So the way we do it when we pull the center is my backside two are running to reach. So whatever is at the line of scrimmage or not, the guard and tackle's job is the same. The guard is replacing the center and the tackle is replacing the guard. Anything goes back door, the ball's going so far away anyways. If anything goes back door, they don't matter. So you just forget about it. So as the backside guard, you're replacing the center. As the backside tackle, you're replacing the guard. So you open up your hips, you open up your shoulders, and you reach to run, or run to reach, sorry. And then when we get out in space, in terms of aiming point, the way I tell my pullers is I always want you to attack outside shoulder, because if we can get this to the sideline, we're probably scoring, right? So I want you to try and run through the outside shoulder of the defender with eyes inside. If your eyes are inside, you're always going to cut off anything that's flowing. If your eyes are inside and nothing is flowing, then you work your way out to the sideline, because anything to the sideline is going to be receiver's responsibility. Receivers are working outside in. They're trying to camp on outside shoulder. So essentially they're adding into that pin and pull concept, creating complementary football, where if you have an angle working down, you're pinning, right? Same with receivers here. In this instance, the receiver has a low player, so he's going to pin down and leave the corner. If it was flipped, he doesn't have leverage on a low player, so he's going to stay on top of the corner and play outside in on the corner. And the pullers can take care of the half once the half presents himself. Okay, so ultimately what we're doing is across the board, we're working on angles down and pulls around, angles down and pulls around. In terms of the receivers away from the call, phrase I use, I say join the party, right? The field corner in this play means nothing. The field half in this play means nothing. The Sam in this play means nothing unless he's blitzing hard off the line of scrimmage, timing it up with the run-ups. So these three receivers, right, we have pullers for the half in the corner. We have one receiver over there. They have a free safety that's typically a free hitter. If my RWB in this instance can go join the party and run hard angles across the field, yeah, we might bring a couple bodies with us, but more often than not, especially in high school football, these guys to the field aren't going to run with you, especially if they're in zone. Right? We can go pick off that free safety and spring our guy free, right? That's the hope, at least, right? That's a bonus as a cherry on top. But that's really what we're trying to do here. The other way to run it, which is one of the clips I'm going to show you, is if you're already running power, it's a pretty easy install, that your center and your backside tackle are going to work together through the backside D tackle to the backside linebacker, and your boundary guard or your backside guard, is always pulling. And that way you simplify your backside if there are potential center issues or potential snap issues, or maybe your guards are just really, really good athletes. You can also pull the guard instead of the center. So that's the X's and O's of it. Anything there, Coach, before we go to the clips?
No, I think that's really good. I mean, I think that the options on the backside are something that I think often it's easy to lump that in. Obviously, we're talking about a play that's called pin and pull, right? Or buck sweep. And everyone talks about the pullers, but making those decisions on, okay, can my center, and we, obviously coaching with you, like I got to see Cody work every night as well. That's not a typical center, right? Like most teams, you're not going to have a guy that combines his athleticism with his skill level in terms of blocking in space as well. Because being an athlete and being able to, block in space, doing things. And then you get to the snap proficiency thing. So it'd be really easy to draw this play up and like, okay, you know, they're running this at Laurier or Cambridge Lions, and this is how they run it. You go put it in your high school team. You go, okay, every time we run this, the center snaps the ball, you know, 2 out of every 5 times. It's not where we want it to be. This play sucks. We're going to trash it. I think it's good to have, you know, that perspective on the backside, especially like you mentioned, if you're already running power. And even, you know, I know that the conversation, like when we ran this, when I was at Laurier as well, we would always auto pull the backside guard. But I think we got some stuff out of this by pulling the center this year again, because it just fit our personnel better. So I think those options are something that, you know, if you like the play, there's more than one way to run it. And obviously there's more than one way to mesh it as well. And like I was about to say, you know, I think that's probably where you're going to go next. So yeah, awesome. If you want to take some of the clips and run it through that way. But, you know, I think it's one thing for people to think about, like, it doesn't have to be, you know, exactly how it's drawn up here. There's a few options you have to make it fit your offensive line or your system better.
Yeah. So yeah, just like Coach said, there are different ways to mesh it. You'll see in my clips, with my Cambridge clips, you'll see one version of a mesh. In my Laurier clip that I'll show, you'll see a different version of a mesh, 2 different versions of a mesh, sorry. And then there's also a 5th version that you can use as well, that I don't have a clip up ready for you, but is very easy to install. So we'll start, this is us against Brantford down in the red zone. The blocking isn't perfect here, but you can see my backside guard is working to reach. My backside tackle is working to reach. They don't do the best job ever getting there, but they get just enough that we're able to get through. Would I like to not have this guy there? Absolutely not. I'd rather him be blocked completely, but our back does a great job of work at aim point. But what we do here is we're teaching our back to put his heels at the quarterback's toes, so that he can run shoulders to the sideline. I want him to be completely flat. And then in terms of his aiming point, I'm telling him that he's replacing the 3 receiver, right? So we're not making a decision unless something crosses our face. We're not making a decision until we cross that to the 3rd receiver aiming point. So if you're ever confused about where your aiming point, you obviously want to create landmarks for your athletes as much as possible. Pre-snap, right? If my receivers are lined up appropriately, which is what they should be, right? We practice that stuff all the time in terms of spacing. Pre-snap, he can take a peek left and right and look to his field, the play side 3 receiver, and say, where is he? Like, where is that human? I can go attack that spot, right? So creating that landmark. Obviously, if he's running to an isolated set, it changes a little bit in the sense that it's basically read this and I'm out, right? You're just reading your pullers, reading the space, and just being a good athlete at that point. But in terms of going at the numbers, we want to replace the 3 receiver. So in this instance, we're going to get our crackdown, right? Our crackdown gets out leveraged. So at that point, the back says, I have something that's crossed my face. So I put foot in the ground and I go vertical. Anytime something crosses my face in any type of off tackle, even in inside zone, something crosses your face, put your foot in the ground, go vertical, right? You have to get your positive yardage back. You can see we get our pin down on the front side because my play side tackle has leverage. We get our great pin down here, and then my play side guard, my play side tackle are pulling around. So my play side guard sees numbers. So he sees numbers from my kick out player. Our pullers are taught follow numbers. Wherever the numbers go of your kick out player, whether that's power or buck sweep like this, wherever the numbers go, you're following numbers. So in this case, he sees numbers, so he follows numbers. My second puller sees numbers, so he follows numbers. So we get both pullers crammed up, which, yes, eliminate him. It's a lot cleaner, but we ultimately still get the walk in because our pullers make correct reads and our back is following his pullers, again, creating complementary football, right? Our back is seeing the same thing that our pullers are seeing, that our receivers are seeing. When you put it all together, yeah, it's not a perfect play, but is it a 6-yard touchdown anyways? Yeah, it's a 6-yard touchdown anyways. So in terms of how we mesh this specifically from a back quarterback perspective, I wish the back was just a little more patient, right? We want to try and make sure anytime we can that we make sure that the ball is caught perfectly. In this instance, in this summer, I should say, we got away with that a little more because our snap proficiency was so high, we were able to cheat it a little bit with the back. We still have to be patient through the mesh. And what you can see right away is that foot open, knee open, hip open, shoulder open. Our sternum is facing the sideline. Then what you see from the quarterback is he's going to ride this out for a shuffle and a drive. and then he's going to attack to hold him. We just don't want to have a heel line defensive end. All he's got to do is burst out of that mesh like he does here, and that gets him to hesitate, making him a non-factor. Looking from the receiver standpoint, our boundary receiver does a great job of just blocking it up, right? At the goal line, does he need to join the party here? No, right? He's just going to take his shots. And then from the receiver standpoint, we're adding a tag here where we get a crackdown, which is actually what springs us for the touchdown here, because we pin the toughest block on the goal line. Our receiver does a great job of getting contact and keeping him at the goal line. And then everybody else says, I have inside leverage on the goal line. I have inside leverage. I'm not going to try and steal outside leverage at that point. I'm just going to kick it out, which I think is a great decision here. Again, complementary football, walk-in touchdown. Anything there from you, Coach, before we go to the next one?
No, it's good. I mean, I think the details on the mesh are important. I think if you try and mesh this out of the same mesh as your inside zone, it's very hard to get your running back shoulders to the sideline. So you may need something off of this in your offense where the running back's in that location, obviously pass as well. And something else to have out of this. And that's, probably a clinic for another day. But, I think that's one thing, that has helped us when I've run it at multiple levels is making sure that your back's feet are in front of the toes of the quarterback. It just lets them get a much cleaner look at where they're trying to take the football.
Yeah. One thing in terms of that, having back in different locations, just as a quick aside, tell them in protection, like ultimately once you're comfortable and confident that your backs know their protection rules, tell them they can line up wherever they want. That gives you opportunities to break tendencies. Just tell them to line up. They can line up however they want, wherever they want, so that defensive coordinators can't just pick on tendencies. And then if you're not comfortable with running backs, knowing their protections in terms of like giving them the freedom to line up where they want, just tag it in for them, right? So whatever your protection is, add an ugly tag or whatever you want to call it, where they start in a different spot is another way to do it. Okay, going to a second clip here. This is our playoff game this past week. So looking at our numbers, we're running this at a spread again. We got a fullback in the 4 hole, right? We're going to come in and add on the C-gap player. Now we got to do a better job counting numbers here, right? So we ran a lot of bubble. We essentially just use this as bubble blocking, and my 3 receiver here just miscounts this. So we get 1-on-1, 2-on-2, and he's thinking I'm going to probably end up going 3-on-3. But this guy doesn't matter. We have pullers for him. This is by far the most dangerous guy. So we should come in and add here, go 2-on-2. Then when we get our pullers, we should be out the gate. But our running back has to make a play really quick because my 3 receiver just notices a little late. He's having that oh no moment right here. Like, oh no, that's my guy. Oh no, that's my guy. Oh no, that's my guy. Right. And we fix it on the sideline. My crackdown player is just a little late to the party, right? He's got to be up a little tighter. We got to be able to pin that in tight. In terms of my pullers, my first puller here, you could very easily say he's got to kick that Sam out. Coach, what are you doing? Why is he not touching that Sam? That Sam is so far upfield that my puller, as an athlete, as good of an athlete as he might be, is not going to get anything that causes any type of real effect on that player with that Sam coming so hard upfield. I would rather, as an offensive line-minded guy, and there are going to be guys that might dispute me here, but I would rather pull up tight and say he's going to run by it and trust my back to follow me. That's what he's thinking here, and I think it's a right decision based on what ends up happening with the play. He pulls it up tight. My second puller gets stuck, so he shuts it down, which is a good decision, right? So the guy he's pulling to, we're pulling for 1. Second puller is pulling for this one. Second puller's guy comes, so he shuts it down. Fantastic job. Again, our center was very, very smart and a good athlete. He's able to shut himself down in the spot, taking up 2 gaps, and he's still able to keep him right in that spot without losing. And then here comes the party. So you can see my 2 receiver, number 3 here, is trying to camp outside shoulder. That's what I wanted to do, because what's supposed to happen is this is supposed to work this way. As this develops, he's shadow boxing, and then 24 just takes a bad angle because he misjudges speed. And we're off to the races. 17 does a great job, foot in the ground, crazy move. right? Not a lot of guys can go full speed and then decide not to go full speed anymore like this. Wild. Looking at the backside, okay, we get run to reach. We get run to reach. We just got to get in front of that really, really close, really, really close. But at the end of the day, right, back has good tracks. We get good patient mesh. Back trusts his pullers, right? Something comes up field, he gets foot in the ground and gets vertical. We're out. Again, beauty of buck sweep is sometimes it's going to be ugly, right? Whether the success of the play is there or not, sometimes the play is going to be ugly just from the essence of using two pullers and creating two open gaps. That sometimes happens. But sometimes even in ugly looks with buck sweep, you get defenders going so hard vertically that when you get foot in the ground, they can't play you, right? They can't play that anymore. Similar to like running counter, for example, that if you get defenders going so hard vertically when you're getting that downhill movement, it's hard for them to succeed. This is a great example if you're looking at it from a high school level. If I have one of those stud athletes that I'm putting at running back, well, this is the kind of stuff that can just happen, right? We like realistically, who do we block here? We block the pin down from my play side tackle. We block the second puller with my second puller guy, and we block the backside D tackle. That's pretty much it, right? Yet it's still a 45-yard game. That's the beauty of buck sweep is when you put the ball in your athlete's hands with angles and pullers, sometimes good stuff just happens, right? Good stuff just happens. That's my last one from a summer ball perspective. Anything there, Coach, before I flip over to two quick clips from a university perspective?
No. Did you have the loose? I know we ran in this game. We ran like a jet sweep and we used the pin and pull blocking. You don't even need to pull it up, but it's early in the game. I mean, I think it's one thing where, you know, obviously you're always looking for like how much mileage can I get out of this play? Like if I'm going to install concept X, how much mileage can I get out of that concept? And you know, it's one thing. Oh, that might have been it there. You know, when you put this in, you want to have multiple ways to run it. This was just another really simple way. You know, we've shown the buck sweep out of this look into the boundary, which is what Coach drew up. And then we've shown the other two coming to the field here. You know, here, I know you got it set up to run off the jet sweep. And it's a bit of a wildcat look. We had a receiver in at quarterback here, but, you know, we put a fullback at the tailback spot and another fullback in the slot. So you kind of create that overload look. I know we don't get a huge crazy result here, but it's just another example of I'm actually going to do a video in the next couple of weeks on for high school coaches. If you have two really good athletes, which I think is kind of, you know, if you have two really good athletes and one of them isn't the quarterback, I should say, because certainly that comes up. But if you got one really good receiver and a really good running back, what are some ways that you can get the running back involved in the passing game? And what are some ways you can get the receiver involved in the run game? I think that's one of my best pieces of advice for high school coaches is like, if you have two really good players, you know, and one's playing receiver, one's playing running back, trying to get them both involved in both phases so that you can't get like weather or down and distance out of using that player. So like, let's say you're down 21 points in the third quarter. How many times are you going to run inside zone? Not that many, but you still got to find a way to get the ball to your running back. Or, you know, if it's a pouring rain or if it's, you know, Canadian football in November, you know, how many ways can you get the ball to a guy like this, like Chase Judge from Jacob Haspler, or, you know, whatever that aren't, you know, in the pass game, him just running that deep post route or whatever. So, you know, exact same principles here, just another way you can get to it.
Yeah. Like effectively what we're doing here is we're running this to our tailback out of 41, right? Yeah. That's essentially what we're doing, right? Or 32 tight lead. Okay, let's go a couple. Laurier. So here we're running it to the field out of a 32 or out of a 23 tight strong look. And what we're doing here is we're actually adding something we call a secure block, right? Where basically these guys are pulling, and he's just adding for any dangerous run through. If nothing runs through, he's just adding, right? So if you're looking from a high school perspective, defenses don't travel a whole lot, right? It's very rare that defenses will travel with you. So you can add guys to the box for free, right? So in this instance, right, we look at him, he's not running with it. So we get it for free.
Yeah, I think that's an
ahead.
awesome tag to add to that.
Yeah. We get a head up the end, which we'll see on the end cut, which makes it a little trickier, but we do a pretty good job of getting our seal, right? Especially from a head up the end. We can't ask for a whole lot more than this. My hope is that my second puller takes some flatter angle, is able to get skinny around that. But again, that can be pretty tough. Okay, you see a subtly different mesh here. But again, we get shoulders to the sideline ultimately, right? We get shoulders to the sideline. That's what's important. Looking from the end cut. Okay, we got our pin, a tough pin, a pull around outside shoulder, and a pull around. We got to get a little more depth and a little skinny. Then we get our backside cut off. Right, so here's an example where we're using the guard. So the second puller is responsible for this guy at this point, which means this double team is actually working back. So we can hammer this, right, based on our numbers. Receiver adds down because they have a low player. I actually do want to show really quickly from the side cut. So they have a low player that we can't really account for. He's saying, I got two high players. I don't care about the high players. We got pullers. Let's take care of the down players. So my receiver comes to join the party and says, I can help with the down players. So ultimately what we have here is we have my play side tackle and our X receiver double teaming out in space. That's not a combination you see a whole lot, right? And they actually get it, right? We're missing, our X receiver misses on the double, but can I expect them to figure that out on the fly? That's a tough one, right? We're not used to that. But it's a great recognition by our receiver, Ente, who's now in the CFL. He says, I have two high players. Those two high players don't matter, right? I'm gonna take the 8 yards, right? Rather than going to get him and potentially only getting 4. It's a great decision.
Yeah, that's one of those things in high school. Like, I mean, I think every year, I mean, we had a ton of success with this back like 2015, 16, 17 at Laurier, like Levondre Gordon and those guys on this, and different variations of it. It's one of those plays that I always find like, oh, we should put that in, and you put it in. Like, that's exactly what happened with us this summer. Like in the middle of the year, you know, we were trying to find ways to get some of our guys in space, and this was one of the things that you were able to come up with that ended up being super productive. I think, you know, going forward, it's going to be one of those things, especially in high school. Like,
I agree. Anytime
you get the chance to make the defense rally to the ball in kind of an unpredictable way. So like when inside zone's great, I love inside zone. Inside zone is what I've based my run game around in my career. But you know, as the Mike linebacker, that ball's hitting in an 8-yard box typically, right? Whereas on this, like you saw the first play, you know, those 2 plays from the summer are actually big cutbacks, you know, or cut ups, I should say. These last couple have been, you know, more true, I don't want to say off tackle runs, but, you know, similar
to more to the edge.
More towards the edge. And you get those guys now having to run on those angles can be pretty tough.
So here we get another different look. Okay, so now we're back to running out of a spread look. We're going to get our crack down. We miss on it a little bit, but here all we've done is we've changed the aiming point a little bit. So instead of aiming more on top of 3, now we're saying we're aiming on top of 1. So because we're aiming on top of 1, we need to get the back there faster, which means we need to change our mesh. And Jax has been with me, you know, along my journey a long time, and he knows my typical avid hatred for true toss, but we're running pretty much true toss here. And what you're seeing out of the back is you're seeing this crossover step to create that patience that we're looking for in the mesh, but also still build him closer to the aiming point, right? So we're getting 2 at once there, right? We're creating that patience, but we're also getting him closer to the mesh. Right, that one single step already puts him outside the view of basically everything B gap in, right? All of a sudden we're on a race, right? And again, looking at this, we're going pins and pulls. Now we make a mistake here. We're a little late, we're a little soft, and we go to the wrong one as the receiver. We should be down on here, and then it's our big play side tackle one-on-one with a corner. That's a matchup we usually like. My tackle ends up running by the half here because he wasn't expecting it. He was expecting at the corner the whole time. So we end up getting undercut. But you can see how this would work. We're on him. These 2 guys have to run through this traffic, and then we're one-on-one out on the edge, right? So just another way you can configure it. If you're saying I have let's say I have really good blockers out in space in terms of my receivers, or I have a running back that's really, really quick to the edge, and I just can't get that mesh. I can't figure out that mesh, or I can't figure out that read with the cut up if I get undercut, right? What you do is you just change the aiming point subtly, move the back subtly, right? And now it's the same stuff here. Nothing changes here other than for that first puller. Nothing changes for the second puller. Nothing changes for the other guys. It's just that first puller recognizing I'm going a little more lateral. So that subtle difference, right? To the defense, this all looks the same other than the mesh, right? The crackdown, the pullers, it all looks the same, right? But for us, it's that subtle difference that can create a huge advantage for us in terms of creating that wall and a kick out on a corner for a running back that we're like, we just got to get him to the sideline, right? Again, looking at high school, how many different ways can I get my back the ball and not let the defense just know what's happening? Here's just another way to do it. And this is another way to break your back alignment tendency as well.
Yeah, so absolutely. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when you look at, concepts like this. Most teams that we defend, especially the summer football at high school level, if the back is on the left of the quarterback, the run is going to the right of the quarterback, like probably 90%, right? Obviously zone can cut back, etc. But this is I think a valuable play, even if it's a 6-7 times a year, so that those inside linebackers can't, really trigger front side, or that C gap player who's, right now he's saying, hey, my job is not to get reached by this fullback. I got to stay in the C gap. If it's inside zone, I can't get kicked out and allow the cutback. Well, now you take that, over pursuit towards what he thinks the aiming point will be. You're able to get the ball in space.
Yeah. So that's what I got for you on buck sweep. Anything for me, Jax, that you want to bring to the table? I want to share.
No, that's great. I mean, I think again, it's one of those things that I think going forward, I'm going to try and remember to have in earlier, just because you get, efficiencies in terms of, okay, we can run the jet sweep with the same blocking. It's the same blocking for the receivers as our bubble screen. If you have athletic offensive linemen, I always talk about angles and pullers, I don't know if I was an athletic offensive lineman, but I was a small one at least. So I was in the category of, I don't just want the one-on-one down blocks, please. And so, in high school, I think, as well as the flexibility in the way you do the different pullers, right? Because the body of your left guard may be entirely different than your center, than of the right. So, it doesn't have to be one of these prescribed ways. You could be look, Timmy is always going to pull on this because he's the guy that's pulling. So we're just going to make it work with the backside, like we did with the center. Yeah. Right. We just felt like that was such an advantage for us to be closer to the play side and have such a good athlete, in space there. Especially, I think the difference between a power pull, ironically, our best puller in the power game would have been our boundary guard, but our best puller in the buck sweep game would have been our center. So, if you've got that, that linebacker that's also playing guard for you because, your high school program, that's super common, or, you get a couple injuries, this is a kind of way that you can say, hey, we're going to try and run the ball and still be physical, but not have to do it in a way that doesn't, that evens the score, right? If you got a fast running back, athletic offensive lineman, this can be a great way to use those guys to their skill set instead of trying to make them do the more traditional, hey, we're going to go double this 3 technique, knock them off the ball. Well,
yeah. You don't have to go bang your head against the wall anymore.
100%. So thanks again, Coach. Appreciate it again. I'm going to kind of use this as a bit of a call out. I'm going to put something out on Twitter, whether I get this out this weekend or next week. For OSFL coaches, had a great first season. Shout out to Football Ontario, for putting that together. And obviously we wish we were still playing, but what a great league. And, what a great time we had coaching a great team this summer. And I hope there's more OSFL coaches that are willing to share some ideas on here with us. And then we'll try and flip it back around. And after the high school coaches do their thing in the fall, a lot of them are the same guys in some cases, but, for the guys that aren't doing both, maybe I'll bug them and get them to do some stuff in the winter. So thanks again, Coach. And make sure, if you haven't already checked out, Zach's got other videos here for the offensive line stuff. If you look through our page, I think this is video 6 or 7. So thanks again. Always willing to do this with us, and appreciate it.
Everybody, we'll see you.